Good evening, everyone. Welcome you all to the training program of Lab for Learning and Life Skills offered by Government College for Women, Thiruvananthapuram, Kerala. As you all know, Lab for Learning, also known as Learning Hub, is a technology-rich learning environment which provides training opportunities for the students, postgraduate students of all the disciplines who have flair in research, and this lateral learning serves as a space for peer group discussions and is learning space with peers to work on a project or group assignments. And the best part of this project is to provide mentoring and support through the sharing of experiences and expertise. So, in this academic year 2020-21, we are starting with a series of expert talks. Today we have Dr. Manishankar Babu, Assistant Professor of Botany, University College Trivandrum, for the first talk. To talk about Manishankar, he is a good friend and colleague of us, having vast experience in the field of research, especially on oncology, signal transduction, cell metabolism, microRNAs, stem cells, animal models of cancer, molecular diagnostics, mitochondrial signaling and biogenesis, etc. Dr. Manishankar Babu had his PhD in biotechnology from University of Kerala on the thesis entitled Regulatory Mechanics of Nuclear Factor Kappa B in Human Cancer Cells. He also he was also the awardee of UGC-sponsored Raman Postdoctoral Fellow at the Department of Microbiology and Immunology, Indiana University School of Medicine, Indianapolis, United States of America. He is the recipient of the International Internship sponsored by Fostering Linkages in Academic Innovation and Research, FLAIR, initiated by the Directorate of Collegiate Education and the Department of Higher Education in United Kingdom at the University of Hull. Dr. Babu was awarded Professor A. Abraham Gold Medal for securing the highest percentage of marks in MSc degree examinations in genetics and plant breeding during the year 2003. I am indeed honored and privileged to welcome our dear friend Dr. Manishankar Babu to initiate the 2020-2021 activities of Lab for Learning and Life Skills of our college and to present his today's topic. More than being a presentation, I personally believe that it will be an experience sharing the walks through his life as a researcher. So we are extremely happy to have you, Dr. Babu, here. To know more, we all are eager to know more about research, why and how. Welcome you on behalf of the college and the Lab for Learning and Life Skills. Over to you.
Thank you, dear Cesare teacher. It is indeed a privilege and an honor for me to initiate this year's Lab for Learning programs. So today I'm here to talk about research, why and how. So I'll not. This is not a actually. Dr. Sitara told me to give a talk on research. So I will give you a brief introduction or baptism into research. What is research? And a little bit of experience sharing we can have at the end of the talk. So this is my contact email as well as my mobile number. You can note it down and you can contact me anytime regarding any research related queries. So first we'll start with the question, why research or why a career in research? So we know that there is a vast amount of knowledge that we still are yet to explore. So that is the scope of research. So we need to find out what are the things that we know and what are the things that we don't know. So our ignorance is infinite, and we'll try to explore as best as we can to delineate the knowledge that is existing in the universe. So what are the incentives of doing good research? So you have the opportunity to innovate. So innovation means like it can be problem solving, it can be creative solutions to problems, it can be intelligence, it can be ideas, or it can be just a vision. So you can materialize your ideas. So let us say you have an idea, you can see it materialize in the form of a product or a patent. So that is indeed rewarding regarding research. Then you can also solve real world problems. So you can see throughout the world there are a lot of issues, and currently corona being a major problem, we have the opportunity in research to solve those problems. You can reach out to people uh, in vast regions of the world, even without seeing or hearing about them. So that is also a power of research, and you can have an impact. Your research will have an impact at a global scale, and you can also contribute significantly to the economy of the country. So these are some of the incentives to choose research. So let us say I was talking about innovation. So you can have different types of innovation. So basic research does come under the lowest category of research innovation. So here you have research divisions, you have academic partnerships, journals, conferences. So this is like in the innovation rung, it will be regarded as the lowest. So the highest would be a breakthrough innovation, wherein you will really come up with a product that never existed, or it can be a disruptive innovation, wherein you will get rid of all the existing technologies and you are introducing a new technology or a product. And then sustaining innovation is also another important aspect. So what are the aspects, or what are the things that we need to do in order to sustain this innovative environment? So these include R&D labs, design, thinking, all those things. So the first and the most important thing for a researcher is you need to be motivated. So let us see what will motivate us to do research or take research as a career. So we can divide motivation into two: extrinsic as well as intrinsic. So intrinsic is something that is within us. So it can be curiosity, a sense of achievement, social status, social contact, a sense of competence, a sense of progress, pride, fulfillment, power, fun, desire to learn, and fear of failure. So these are some of the intrinsic factors that drive us to do research. Extrinsic factors include rewards, praise, pleasure, or fear of being considered less. So these are some of the extrinsic factors that drive us to do good research. So let us look at the attributes that one needs to have to be a good researcher. So one needs to be having a good judgment as to what is right and what is wrong. He or she needs to be good in communication skills. He or she needs to be very creative so that they can come up with creative solutions. We need to be persistent. So that is very important attribute. And you need to have significant organizational skills. So these are some of the attributes that a good researcher or a good research student needs to have. I hope I'm audible. So let us look at creativity. So the most creative of all the persons was Da Vinci, Leonardo da Vinci. So you can see many of his paintings contained a lot of information that people deciphered, and people are still deciphering till now. So these are some of his sketches. So these are like in the uh, uh, time immemorial, and now you can see that still people are figuring out the meaning of these sketches that he had made. So that was well beyond the scope of those times. So this is called, you can call this as creativity. So this is a important attribute that one needs to have. One need not be as creative as Da Vinci, but we need to be creative. And we need to have a good judgment. So you can look at Archimedes. So he designed something called an Archimedes screw, which was used to draw water from a pond to a different area. And his screw did not disrupt the movement of fishes. So because it was very slow, like around 20 to 30 revolutions per minute, it used to do. So the fishes were very safe, and they are still being used currently in different areas of Europe. So this is one of the best innovations. So you can call this as a good judgment, like how he could judge that this innovation was very useful. And then you can come to good communication. So none other than Shakespeare, right? William Shakespeare. So you need to have a good communication skill in order to have a good personal growth in research. And then organization, none other than Marie Curie. So she was really organized, and she was the person who argued that researchers should not be given incentives in terms of money. The organizations should be given so that the organizations can promote more people who can do innovations. So this is she stood for organization. So, and then persistence, none other than Thomas Alva Edison. So he was really persistent enough to find out the element that was responsible for the glowing light bulb that we use today. So these are some of the attributes. So coming to the general principles, so mentoring is a very important factor in developing a good researcher. And one of the another important attributes is you should not follow the mainstream. So you should not be a follower. So you should have something innovative in you, so that you can be a good researcher. And you have to have a good observation skill, because serendipitous discoveries are much more. So even though you have a discovery, you might not even realize that you have stumbled upon something. So, and you have to have a very simple approach to research.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes,
can
yes.
you please can you please share your screen,
Oh, okay.
because somebody was sharing the screen and we lost your screen.
Okay. Hold on. Is it visible now?
Ah, yes, very
Okay.
much.
Okay. So we need to have a good mentoring. You shouldn't follow the mainstream. You need to be open to serendipitous discoveries. You need to have a simple approach, and most of all, you need to be really passionate. Uh, for research, you need to have a good passion and dedication and involvement. These are some of the attributes that a good researcher should have. So, coming to science, like science is very hard, but it doesn't limit your boundaries, and it is very interactive. So that is why science as a career is a very, very rewarding experience. And mostly people think that all the good scientists are born smart. Never. They are very careful. They are very persistent. These are some of the two traits that you can cultivate, and you can become a good scientist or a researcher in any field, in any walk of life, be it science or non-science. It doesn't matter. So we need to have a reasonable work ethic and very high amount of perseverance and drive or self motivation. These are some of the important attributes that as a researcher one should have. And you should be really busy, and you should work really hard and wise. So smart work as well as hard work are required. The second important thing is to publish your relevant work. So you need to write something. So as Benjamin Franklin, he was saying, either write something worth reading or do something worth writing. So you should do research as well as try to publish it. So you can consider papers like manuscripts as your scientific currency. It add value to your personality. And we need to think independently. Who better than Linus Pauling? So if you have a good idea, he said you should better to have. It is better to have a lot of good ideas. So we can always try to do something differently. And of all the things that we need to take care is we should be realistic and fair to ourselves. So you should set realistic goals. Set goals that you can achieve. Go outside your comfort zone, but at the same time, you should not be setting a goal that you will never be able to achieve. So which will lead to disappointment. So these are some things that you need to remember. And we can have a diverse portfolio so that you can have long term goals as well as short term goals, difficult ones and easier ones to achieve, so that you stay focused and satisfied during the entire course of your research work. And then most important thing is, like, you need to have a fulfilling career, and it should be rewarding and not frustrating. So that is also very important aspect. So whatever we select as a research problem should be achievable. So that it is very important in that sense that we never should get frustrated in research. And always it's up to us. So education is an admirable thing, as Oscar Wilde would say. And time to time, nothing worth knowing can be taught. So these are some of the ideas that you need to remember. And we need to be ourselves. So science adds value to us as an independent thinker. So that is the most important thing in research as well as in science, because we have the independence to innovate. And as a good researcher, we need to be smart. So smart person is the one who will interact with his colleagues, and he or she learns from his mistakes. At the same time, he learns, the brilliant ones will learn mistakes from the mistakes of others, so that he or she will never repeat them. So these are some of the things that we need to remember. And also we need to remember that we shouldn't always impose our ideas and values on our trainees or colleagues. And we need to be different in terms of our thought. So difference in terms of our thought, so that we are not followers and we are leaders. So we innovate and we add value to the existing scientific knowledge. So that is our goal. And we also need to be a mentor and an advocate. So you need to take care of people around you, and you need to find a person or a mentor who can train you well, as well as you should be kind and good to your students as well as trainees, so that you together we achieve uh, novelty in our research and add value. So this is the latest document that was published by UGC. So it was released in September on good research practices. So I would share the document with Dr. Sitara. She'll be providing this. So these are some guidelines as to uh, how we should carry out a good research. So research as an endeavor, it consists of certain attributes. I already said. So ethics is very important. So we need to be really careful about this ethical research. So whenever we do research, we should be very sure that we are doing something that is ethical, not something that is non-ethical. And we need to be rigorous. So we need to examine our results. We need to be sure that whatever we are coming out with, the results are really genuine and reproducible. And another important attribute that the research we conduct should have is it should be relevant to the present circumstances. It should not be something that is irrelevant. And our research should be very transparent. That is, all aspects of our research should be open, so that people can appreciate and or criticize. So always it need not be appreciation. There may be criticism also. So we need to be open for that. So in order to appreciate or criticize, the research should be transparent. And we need to respect the environment as well as the community in terms of research. And we should be impartial in our, we should not be biased on any of our ideas. So based on the results, we need to interpret. So impartiality is one of the important attributes that a researcher must have, and he or she must be accountable. So the amount of funding that we receive and the amount of other chemicals, in terms of chemicals or equipment that we use, we should have an accountability, because we are accountable to the society, because most of the research in India is funded by public organizations. So public funded institutions are there. So we are using public money, so we need to be accountable. So these are some of the important things that one should remember. And one of the most important things that as a researcher, one should remember is about misconduct. So what is research misconduct? So we can consider it as fabrication or falsification or plagiarism. So fabrication is, as you know, creation of data. So wherever there is no data, they will try to create a new data. So that is known as fabrication. And falsification or plagiarism, like you avoid certain experiments so that you don't want to show them. You will show the results of only those that you want to do. So that is something that is having a bias or falsification. So all these are not good for research. So when we come to a research cycle, so we have to have certain ideas. So the first one is you have to identify a research topic, something that you have to work on. We design or plan how we need to achieve the research topic. We break it into small milestones and we start working on each. During this process itself, we analyze our results, and we see whether it is in conformity with our theory or not. And then finally, when if it falls in place, we try to publish the results and try to disseminate. So you can say that selection of from the selection of research problem to dissemination of research output in the form of publication. This constitutes a research cycle. So how do we select a good research problem? So this is one of the most important aspects of research. So 90% of your research is done if you select a good research problem. So this is the area that we need to focus much more, because 90% of success will depend on the kind of problem that you select for your research program. And then research design, how we need to achieve this research problem, the our goals set in this research problem. We can design our experiments or our conduct based on the research problem. So what are the questions that the research addresses? So that is the most important aspect. And whether it contributes to new knowledge. So the question we are focusing must address whether it is having new knowledge in it. So whether we are adding to the existing literature in terms of knowledge, that is something that we need to really focus our research problem, whether it is able to contribute to new knowledge. Then whether it can solve challenges, whether it is solving a real life problem or whether it is solving a challenge that is existing. So no solution is existing for a particular problem. Your research problem is trying to solve it. So that will be very important, very significant. And whether it is correcting any factual errors that is there in the current theories. So that also can be a kind of research problem that you can select, or you can also try to develop new methods. So these are some of the aspects that you can select as your research problem. But the most important thing is it must address some pertinent question, and it should contribute to existing knowledge. It should not be something that is already there. Then we come to, so once you have selected your research problem, we come to research design. So what constitutes a good research design? So you need to have a well documented plan as to what are the objectives that you wish to achieve, and what is the role of you as a researcher and your mentor. It should be defined in your research design. So what are the experiments that you are planning to do? What is the role of your mentor, or what is the role of your guide in terms of planning and execution, and what are the responsibilities? So these need to be clearly defined, and that is constituting a clear or a good research design. So once you do a good research design, then most of the goals that you have set in your research problem will be easily achievable. And another important aspect of research is review of literature. So, as you know, no knowledge is new. So, we all build on existing knowledge. So, we build on the work of other people. So, we need to be very clear as to what is known and what is not known. So, this we can have only do through literature review, a good literature review. So you have to properly, the literature should be properly identified and acknowledged. So the previous works should be clearly defined and acknowledged, and this will constitute a good literature review, and it should locate the research. Our research should be able to be located in a broader research landscape. So let us say we have a research landscape. So what is your research? Where is your research in that landscape? So that you should be able to clearly define. You should be able to locate. So that is what is meant by location of the proposed work in the broad research landscape. And we need to have insights as to how to identify the data sources. So where we are going to get the data, and what are our data sources going to be, and what are the research methods that we will implement in order to achieve a set objectives. And we need to have a rigorous and systematic approach to analyze and synthesize evidence to support our research claims from the literature. So, rigorous approach means you should be repetitive, and it should be clear and precise. No ambiguities should be existing in that, and we should be able to analyze. So we can compare and contrast the kind of results that we are getting, and also we need to synthesize the evidence. Synthesis means we need to add on to the evidence to support our research claims from the existing literature. So this constitutes broadly the literature review. And most important thing in research is documentation. So whatever research that we are doing, it should be documented. So good documentation is a must in any research program. And in terms of scientific research, we need to have laboratory notes. So like you should have a date and a time, the kind of experiments that we are doing, the kind of chemicals that you handle, the quantity, all those things should be clearly mentioned in your laboratory notes. And documentation also consists of research journals. Once your results are analyzed and once you are ready to publish, you can also have research journals as a documents. Let us say you are doing a field survey, field notes become very important. And these also serve in terms of tracking our research progress. So let us say how far in research are we, and how far we need to go. In between uh, a review can be also possible if you have a proper documentation. So this will also serve as a tracking for your research progress. And you should also have a clear maintenance of information from where you have collected the data. So information on data sources are very important. Also, the quality and the storage and retrieval of data is also becomes very quintessential in good research programs. So whether the quality is maintained in terms of our data, all these things should be properly documented. And documentation serves as a good research practice, and it addresses concerns of potential misconduct. So you can always go back to your lab notes and find out whether your results were valid, and they are verifiable. So often many of the cases, like many court litigations or litigations in which misconduct has been detected, people go back to the document, research document. It can be a lab note, it can be a field note or anything. So if it is properly documented, we are safe and our results can be verified by any agency and we will be safe. So that is why documentation of research becomes very, very important. And another important thing is clarity. So the researcher should be very clear what his responsibilities are, and he should have clarity and avoid plagiarism. So he or she needs to understand what is plagiarism and how he or she can avoid this. And falsification of data, fabrication, misrepresentation, all these should be clearly avoided. These can be avoided if the researcher is having a clear clarity on what these are. And we should also report such misdemeanors if it is observed or suspected, let us say from our colleagues or our peers. And also we can minimize conflicts. I mean, many cases these can fall out into conflicts, so we should also minimize the conflicts. To minimize conflicts, it is better, it can be between guide and the student or between peers within the lab. So all these conflicts can be clearly avoided if our roles as researchers are clearly defined and our responsibilities are clearly clarified. And mostly these conflicts will come during the authorship. Let us say you are communicating your research. So let us say your senior or a junior has contributed significantly to that work. So regarding authorship, he or she may have a tiff with you or your guide. So if the roles of each and every person is properly defined and the responsibilities are properly delineated, this kind of an issue never occurs. And another most important thing currently is ownership of intellectual property. Especially this is becoming very relevant in collaborative research as to who will own the intellectual property. So as you all know, intellectual property is adding value to your research in terms of monetary benefits. So then this becomes a very contentious issue if the roles and responsibilities are not properly defined. So even before the research problem is delineated in a collaborative research work, the ownership of intellectual property should be clearly defined so that conflicts can be avoided. And then finally, dissemination. So mostly dissemination consists of publication in peer reviewed journals. So mostly in other high quality forums or peer reviewed journals. So high impact journals like nature or science in case of science, and in other subjects high impact journals are considered as um, good to disseminate our research work because they are peer reviewed and they are considered very high in their respective areas. That's why their citations are pretty high and they are having high impact factors. And the contributions of collaborators, funders, and reviewers should be acknowledged in all these publications. So then we can avoid all sorts of conflicts. arising due to that also. And another important attribute is integrity. So research integrity is very important. So since it is an endeavor that is self-proclaimed, one needs to be very honest, and the methods that one uses must be verifiable in as well as during performance and during evaluation of research. So in all these three aspects, proposals, performance, as well as evaluation, our method should be properly verifiable and it should be transparent. And our we should adhere to rules and regulations and guidelines proposed by the organization wherever we work, as well as institutions from which we get funding before we report our research results. So these should be properly adhered to. And then we should observe the professional code of conduct and norms. So mostly in foreign organizations as well as in many Indian research institutions, they have the Office of Research Integrity. They will look into these aspects. But as consensual researchers, we ourselves should be having these aspects, attributes with us. So we don't need to we not need the Office of Research Integrity to impose anything on us. We on our own, on self volition, should be very careful regarding these aspects. And research contributes significantly because it is a novel endeavor. So novelty is one of the most important aspects, and it should be influential. Our research should influence uh, a subset of people, and should have it should be able to clearly improve their existence in terms of lifestyle, or in terms of knowledge, or in terms of their survival. And that is why what I mean by relevance. Our research should be relevant, and many interdependent factors influence research include quality of research, then benefits and integrity. So all these are interdependent. So a good quality research will definitely benefit people, and the integrity of the research is also likely to be good. So these are some of the interdependent factors in research. And we should promote a good research culture, whether it is in our institution, whether it is in our lab, or whether it is in our class. So we should promote honesty. So research as an endeavor should promote honesty, integrity, and should follow high ethical practice. High standards in ethical practice as well as behavior should be, because it is a scholarly uh, endeavor. So scholarship is involved. So it is not for anyone. Anybody cannot do research. So only research comes in higher education. So we need to be really careful as to maintain the honesty, integrity, and high ethical standards and behavior. So often people deviate from these ethics. This is because of pressure. So mostly people get pressurized either in terms of they need to demonstrate. Let us say our research is having an economic impact, or they will have to show that it has a societal impact, and they also have to demonstrate whether it is monetarily beneficial. So all these add pressure, and these lead to people. The people get tempted to come close to the ethical boundaries, or some even go overboard, because high stakes might be involved. A lot of research fundings, lot of research money might be involved, lot of other things might be involved, like egos. So all these contribute to research misconduct. So this is what I meant by pressure. So research has shown that um, people are feeling immense pressure, especially in research institutions abroad. They are under intense pressure to publish. So nobody wants to know how the research work was carried out, how the results were obtained. So nobody wants to know that. They just want to get it published. So this is the major pressure that researchers like postdocs, PhD students, uh, slowly people in India are also coming under such a pressure. So this is something that is faced, and this is very common in the US. In Europe, it might not be that much, but in the US, it is very high. Also in Southeast Asian countries like Korea, Singapore, uh, and Japan, this pressure is really immense. And this will be reflected later as I show you the data. And then coming back, what has compounded to this problem is there is an annual growth of about 3% in journals, in public, in terms of publication, in terms of last 200 years. So if you look at the last 200 years, there has been an annual increment of 3%. So every year there is an increase in 3% of all the research publications. And this problem gets compounded by predatory journals. So we can say journals with dubious background. So what happens is that there are a lot of journals in which you can publish any data. So this becomes a big issue. And in a research that was done in the mainly in the UK, 2% of scientists admitted to have falsified or fabricated or modified their data in order to get it published. So these are some of the impact that pressure has. It can be a pressure on deadline. It can be a pressure to publish. It can be so. All these are uh, because most of the positions, most of the academic positions in the countries abroad are on contract. So let us say if the person doesn't publish or doesn't get funding, he or she might lose his position. Unlike in India, where uh, permanent positions are still available, there everything is based on a contract. So based on performance. So every 2 years, 3 years, or maybe every 5 years, they have a performance appraisal. So and if he or she is not found to have published enough journals, enough papers in journals, he or she stands to lose his position. So this creates a lot of pressure, and this pressure ultimately leads to research misconduct. So how to monitor misconduct in research? So in order to promote transparency in research, there is a website called Retraction Watch. So they do the monitoring work. So what they do is they monitor the research of many researchers throughout the world, and they come up with uh, people, the names of the investigators who have major retractions. So this is the I have taken the printout of the web page. I think all of you must go through Retraction Watch to see. So you can see that okay, this person has 183 retractions in total. That means he has tried to publish 183 papers. He has already published 183 papers. All of them got retracted, right? So this is not exhaustive. So you can, if you look at the retraction watch, there are many Indians also, unfortunately, and some of them are residing abroad. Some of them from India also. So this is something that we need to be very careful about. Coming back to core values, our research should be ethical. It should be having rigor. It should have relevance. It should be transparent, honest. It should respect. It should be impartial, and it should be independent. So why I say it should be independent is in foreign countries or in the US or the UK, most of the research is funded privately. So private funding comes. So they would pressurize. Let us say the company wants to sell a particular product. They might tell the researcher to publish and say that their product is superior to anything that is available in the market. So such things will make the research dependent on them. So ideally, it should be independent. So mostly publicly funded organizations uh, have good ethics, and they do independent research and they publish without any bias. So this is very important. Impartial, independent research. So coming to research design. So I already mentioned. So research involves research planning, then research design and conduct, and finally dissemination. So research during research planning, one should clearly define the objectives. One should be very clear about the objectives of our research and what is the rationale behind conducting that kind of research. Why we should do this? Why is it significant? So that is what I meant by rationale. So we should be very clear. The researcher, at least, or the mentor, should be very clear as to what is the rationale of the work and what are the objectives. Then the second step will be involved to develop a project plan. So let us say we should have short-term goals and long-term goals. So we can call them as milestones. So let us say within 2 weeks or within 3 weeks, this particular literature review should be completed. So that can be serving as a milestone. And the role of the researcher, the student, as well as the guide should be clearly defined. So that is what I meant by roles and responsibilities. So what are the things that one needs to do? What is the mentor likely to do? What is the student likely to do? All these responsibilities should be clearly defined in the project plan or the research plan. Then another important thing during planning is to ensure the viability of our research. So we should be very clear whether we have the relevant resources available with us, or uh, if we are getting help from others, whether those resources are available with them. So it can be an instrument, it can be access to, let us say, data, it can be access to library, it can be access to anything. But those resources should be available, and the mentor should have expertise, or he or she should get the relevant expertise on the area. So he or she should be a good expert in that particular area before the student takes up research on, start working on that particular area. And the mentor should be, or the student should be properly funded. So funding is a very important aspect in biomedical research, as well as many research problems where in which involves experimentation. So we need to buy a lot of chemicals and consumables. So we need to be properly funded. So these things should be ensured. Then regulatory, ethical, and organizational guidelines must be known, and they should be adhered to. So let us say we have to conduct some experiments on animals. So proper ethical clearance should have been obtained. It can be research on human subjects or human samples. Still, all those ethical and organizational guidelines must be followed. And if our organization doesn't have such a regulatory body, one should constitute it and then do it. And if our research let us say our college or our university doesn't have the relevant um, organizational, ethical, regulatory guidelines following, I think we should refrain from doing such kind of research. So this is very important, and one needs to obtain the proper licenses and approvals and permissions. Let us say one works with radioactive chemicals, one works with some virus, or one works with some harmful bacterium. They should get the proper license and approval from the agencies, and also permissions must be obtained in order to work on those areas, because they are likely to affect others also. So these are some of the important aspects. This will be pertinent to people having access to data. Let us say data on sales, marketing, all those things. There also these things become very relevant. So our research question and documentation. So research question must be very clear. It should be very focused. It should be focused on a real problem. It should be concise. At the same time, it should be nuanced. Nuanced in the sense it should take care of all the aspects of the problem that we are working on. So that's what I meant by concise. Means it should be very clearly defined. And when you say nuance, all the aspects of that particular problem should be clearly deciphered, and it should have a logical approach. Our research question should be logical. Anybody who is going through our research should understand, okay, why, or why the research question becomes relevant. So these are some of the aspects that we need to take care of. And during literature review, one needs to be very careful, because we have to get the literature from reliable sources. So all the literature that you collect must be, you should verify the veracity of them. They should be from peer reviewed journals, and you should ensure that they are error free. So once they are peer reviewed, may not mean that they might be error free. So we need to be checking this. We need to cross check whether there are any factual errors. We should verify them, and the credentials of authors also must be verified. So let us say we have a paper published in a good journal, doesn't mean that that paper might be very good. So we can follow the authors and see what kind of research he or she is doing, and whether his credentials are good. So that will give us an idea as to whether the literature that he or she has published is good or not. Then one needs to have an expertise in the topic. The literature review should be relevant to the problem that we are addressing, and it should not be facts or opinions. One needs to be very clear about what are the facts and what are the opinions. So sometimes when we go through reviews published in many journals, some will be facts that can be verified, and some are the opinion of the authors. So these opinions should be discarded, and only facts must be taken in during literature review. And authors might be biased also. They might be biased in promoting their own concepts. So such biases should be identified during literature review, and our literature review should be current. So it should not be very old. So it should be current, and it should meet the existing requirements. It should meet the current requirements, and it should provide an in-depth coverage of all the aspects of our research, and it should be wide. So these are some of the aspects regarding literature review that a researcher should be careful about. Now, after the literature review, we need to analyze our data. So let us say once data starts coming in, we need to clearly analyze it using proper statistical tools. So the research techniques that we are employing should be defensible. That is, it should be supported by existing literature, and the method should be appropriate, relevant to the discipline, or it should be relevant to the data that we are analyzing. So that must be clearly noted, and appropriate methods must be used to answer the research questions. And we should also ensure that the method that we are using, yields reproducible results. So let us say we are using a statistical tool, it should always yield a consistent result. It should be our data should be reproducible, not that once you use this tool today and next another set of data it doesn't give you reproducible results. So then such kind of tools should be avoided. And the one should be able to clearly and uniformly interpret the results. So it should not be so complicated that nobody can interpret your results. So when you are representing it in terms of diagrams, graphs, or let us say pie charts, the person, even a layman, should be able to easily understand the results of your research. So that is what I meant by easy interpretation. Then data collection is an important aspect. So what is the kind of data that you are going to collect and how you are going to record it? So that is what and when. That is what I meant. And some research could be based only on experimentation. So during experimentation, when you are going to collect the data, different levels of data collection and analysis. So let us say if it is a time lapse experiment, you collect data every 5 minutes, 15 minutes, like that. So these needs to be clearly defined during data collection. And let us say if you are doing a population analysis, whether you are taking a subpopulation or whether you are taking a sample population, this needs to be clearly defined. Which subset of people you are going to analyze? So let us say if you are taking a subset and then you are going to extrapolate your results to the whole population, what is the sampling procedure that you are going to involve? So these should be clearly defined, and whether we need to ensure that our the sample set that we are taking in a population, must be representative of the study population. So let us say we are taking a small sample set, and this sample set is not representative of the study population, our results are going to be skewed. So this also needs to be ensured, and our study design must match the purpose. So let us say our research purpose is to prove a theory or do a testing. The design should be in a way that it will test the hypothesis or test the theory. So that is most important with regard to the study design. And how can we ensure integrity of the data? So whatever data we have collected, whether it is good strong data, we have to ensure. And then what is the data collection? Once you have collected the data needs to be cleaned of some noises. So this is what is meant by data cleansing. So if we are doing data cleansing, what is the process? And it should be properly documented. One needs to go back to the raw data. So let us say we collect the raw data and we need to get the background noise removed from your data, and that is known as data cleansing. So always one should have the raw data with us so that we can properly be documented that what are the processes that we have used and how we have come to the cleaner data, so that one can always go back. And then specific rules should be defined, like how we are going to handle outliers, if any. So let us say our data is there, so there might be always outliers in our data. So how we are going to define these outliers, how we are going to identify them, and what are we going to do about the outliers, how do we remove them? Then some research involves data transformations. That is, a particular data will be extrapolated and transformed. So what is the documentation and how we can justify this transformation? Whether this transformation is required and it is justifiable, one has to look into it. And then inferences from the verified and validated data. How we are going to draw inference from our verified and validated data. And most often computational procedures and computers are involved. So what are the type of computers? What are the platforms that we are using? And what are the procedures? What are the softwares? What is the version of those softwares? All those needs to be properly documented. And if we are using metadata and annotations, whether these are sufficient to ensure meaningful interpretations, that has to be clearly defined. So metadata and annotations, whether they are sufficient to do meaningful interpretations, must also be analyzed. And whether data privacy issues are addressed, that also one needs to be very clear. So currently data privacy is a very sensitive issue, so one needs to be very careful when one handle data of such sort. And one needs to have proper checks for plagiarism, falsification, fabrication, and misinterpretation. One always has to be very clear that one needs to check these tendencies. And especially when you are doing a collaborative work, one has to be very clear about the goals of the project and the anticipated outcomes, what each partner in a collaboration are supposed to do, how the data is going to be collected and shared, and how the changes in research design, if any, will be made, and who will be responsible for drafting the final draft of the publication or the manuscript, and what are the criteria that will be used to identify and rank the contributing authors. Let us say one is the first author, somebody will be the corresponding authors. So there is a criteria that must be used to identify and rank the contributing authors. It should not be based on a bias of a single individual. It should be properly identifiable and ranked. Some criteria must be used here, and responsibility must be taken to submit the reports. What whose responsibility would it be in among the collaborators? That has to be clearly defined, and some person should be able to address the relevance of these research works publicly. So who will let that be? That has to be defined, and the ownership of intellectual property has to be also resolved. So this is the some of the serious issues when it comes to a collaborative work. Then research dissemination. I already mentioned in peer reviewed journals. One has to publish in peer reviewed journals and not in predatory journals. So, what are predatory journals? I can tell you. So, whenever you are sending a manuscript, if your manuscript is guaranteed to be accepted, it can be a predatory journal. And mostly it will not involve any peer review. That is, your manuscript will not be read by your peers. So, it will be directly published. If you pay, you get published. So pay and publish kind of journals are there, and so they will publish anything that is not relevant to the scope of the journal, and mostly it will be misleading and inaccurate, and they will have misleading and inaccurate cell impact factors also. And there won't be any editorial board. Editorial board of a journal consists of reputed scientists in who are well versed in the topics. Mostly experts in the areas will be the members of the editorial board, and they will ensure that proper rigorous rigorous research standards are adhered to. So the lack of such research editorial boards will be a characteristic feature of a predatory journal. So what will be the criterion for a good journal selection? So you have to have a good idea about the aim and scope of the journal, and it should clearly match with our research work. Then most likely our research work will be getting published in that particular journal. We can ensure this by ensuring that the journal has published similar articles previously, and we should also adhere to the requirements of submission of the journal, and whether it is catering to the intended audience. Our research work should be catering to a particular intended research audience. Let us say the journal is on cell science, so we should be able to clearly define our research is relevant to a person who is dealing with cells. So that is what is meant by intended audience, and it should have a good impact factor and rank in that particular field of research. So that is very important, and it should have a very rigorous peer review process. So the editorial board members of the journal should be really good, and the red flags in some journal issues must be clearly defined. What do I mean by red flag is, let us say in certain journals, especially in Chinese journals, if you see, only Chinese authors or same authors will keep on publishing their research articles. So not many new people will be publishing in that particular journal. So then you can understand that that particular journal is not good. So this is what I meant by red flag in journal issues. So the one needs to be very careful during the journal selection. And manuscript rejection. What are the common factors? So manuscript rejection is something that researchers always face. So why does research get rejected? Why does our manuscript get rejected? So we'll look at some common factors. So mostly, if the content of our manuscript does not match with the scope of the journal, they will get rejected. And it may not be, our research may not be relevant to the audience, the target audience of the particular journal. And if you don't conform to the styles of the journal, so let us say formatting guidelines, like with regard to figures, all those things, if you are not following that particular format, they might not accept your manuscript. And also, let us say if you are duplicating, or if you are having, if there is no significant contribution of research, and your work is merely a duplication, then it will be considered as plagiarism. And if our results are also insignificant, or it is just incremental in the sense it is just adding to the existing knowledge and not contributing anything new, then mostly it will be rejected in good journals. And there is no, if you are not going to provide a proper rationale for your study, that also will be rejected. And if your treatment of the subject is very superficial, let us say you are just skimming on the surface of the problem, you are not going deep into the problem, you are not going to analyze it, then also your manuscript is likely to be rejected. And mostly poor study design in terms of statistical tests. So if you are not rigorous with your analysis in terms of statistical tests and controls, if you are not having proper controls for your study, then also your research is mostly will be rejected. And if your result is only preliminary, let us say we can only speculate about the final outcome of the experiment, then also it will be rejected, because there is no room for speculation in terms of publication. So one has to look into all these things. And finally, lack of clarity in writing, this is very important, because I already mentioned you should analyze and present your data in a simple and lucid manner. So if there is no clarity in your writing, then it misleads the reviewers, and most likely the reviewer gets irritated and he will reject the manuscript. So these are some of the factors one needs to be careful if you don't want to get rejected. And then ultimate aim of any good research is to translate it to the beneficial effect of the population or the targeted audience. So let us say if you are working on a biomedical research, and your innovation significantly contributes to patient care, or it improves the life of patients or others, then that is known as translation research. In biomedical terms, it is called bench to bedside. So if this is something that you can achieve, nothing more than this. So one always has to bear in mind that our research proposal or our research problem must lead to something that is translatable. So this also has to be taken care of. So these are the references. So I was not giving my own ideas. These are from relevant scientific publications. So these are the references. And I would like to thank all of you for your patient listening. And I'll be happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Manishankar Babu. We have few questions from the students.
Yes.
Yeah, first one is, what if we are interested in a particular topic, but there is little scope for that topic in future? Is it wise to proceed with that topic for research?
Can you please clarify?
That is, if you are interested in a particular topic, but the topic is having little scope in the
Uh,
future.
when you say scope in the future, what do you mean by that? Let us say scope in terms of employment, scope in terms of impact that research is going to have.
I think Abhirami can
Yeah, I think
answer
Abhirami.
this.
Yes, yes,
Yes,
yes.
ma'am. So, good evening, sir.
Good
So,
evening, Abhirami.
what
Yeah.
I meant to say is, if yeah, so what I meant to say, say is, if the impact that the particular project is going to have on society,
Hmm.
if that is not much relevant.
How does it become irrelevant? Let us say, what is the project that you are working on, and how do you think it is not going to have an impact on the society?
Okay, so for example, so currently I haven't done any project,
Okay.
but in my mind suddenly this thought came that suppose if I'm doing a project, like for example, I'm doing a small project on quantum mechanics, okay,
Okay.
just for
Okay.
example, sir.
Yes.
But if that is not having like a change, like I'm not able to bring some change, like what you said. So it must have, if it is having an impact, a positive impact, like if it changes the view on that particular topic, means in a positive way, it is
Okay.
of course a good project, right? Yeah.
I got
So
it. I
that
got
way.
it. I understand. I understand. So now,
Yes, sir.
Abhirami, you are in your masters. You are in your PG.
Master second year, sir. Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
yeah. So this is this is another important thing that one has to remember. So your time point, your time period for research is very limited. Okay. So the time frame
Okay,
that
sir.
the window of time that you get is around 3 to 6 months. In that
Okay,
period, with the available resources, one might not be able to significantly contribute to the existing knowledge. So
okay.
if your research problem is analyzing a particular area, or if it is incremental also, then it is fine. Because what by research in a PG level, at a PG level, a research project, what how why it is intended to given to research students is that, especially PG level, is given is that you need to understand the research process. So what is research? What is literature review? How do you select a research problem? So that is the aim of the project. So now, by listening to this, your question, I understand that you have a clear idea as to what is a good research proposal. But the thing is, you need to understand the the time point that you are going to have. So even in your research period, let us say, even if you are going for a PhD program, so it should be around 3 to 5 years, ideally, right? So
Yes,
within
sir.
that, within that time frame, you should be able to achieve your research goals. So one has to be, as I mentioned, I already mentioned, it has to be a realistic goal. So when you're talking about a realistic goal, it should be you should be able to realize that particular problem within that period, within that time frame. Let us say 3 years or 5 years, not beyond that.
Okay, sir.
And
Thank
if
you,
you look
sir.
and if you look at the significant contributions of people who have received Nobel prizes, so if you analyze their research work, most of them have been conducted in postdoctoral during their postdoctoral research, not during their masters, not during their PhD. So one has to always remember that until PhD, until your research program is running, it is only a training for you. All the innovation
Okay.
and contributions will happen only during your postdoctoral research, where you have enough time and insight into the problem.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, I hope I answered
Thank
that
you.
question. Yeah,
Yes,
thank you.
thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is also from Abhirami. Like, is there any specific softwares to go with documentation?
Yeah, a lot of softwares are available, like Grammarly, all those things, and also with literature collection, you have Google Scholar. You have some are free, Zotero, Mendeley. You have all those softwares that you can use to documentate for documentation, literature collection, referencing, all those things. Citation managers. Some are paid actually.
I think we will have a special session on that also.
Yes, yes, that is very exhaustive. That is mainly it should be useful for maybe PG students. You can use Google Scholar, so it is simple, and you have all you can get all of them on the internet. So Google Scholar is something that is simple, or one can use Mendeley and Zotero. And Mendeley, but the referencing, the styling might not be proper, especially when it comes to certain research topics. So I would suggest that you stick with Google Scholar, at least at the PG level. And if EndNote is something that if one can afford or one can get it cracked by some computer geeks, I think EndNote is a good software for reference management. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, sir. Another question is from Atira. What research, one second, what research method will be appropriate for examining the impact of COVID-19?
Okay, impact of COVID-19 on what? On whom? So whether are you going to analyze the impact of COVID-19 on economy? If it is
Atira,
economy,
Sir, sir, I'm planning to do a study about the digital awareness of COVID-19, but
Okay.
it's very difficult to find the sample because everyone is doing a lot of surveys nowadays, and I think there will be more bias in this sampling method. So, what research methodology will be more appropriate, sir?
Okay. So what you can do is you can select a subpopulation, okay, or a sample. Let us say sample population.
Okay.
So you can select students. Let us say students at the school level, students at the college level, employees. Let us say age group. You can divide them into simple age groups, and then you can collect the data on those age groups, and then extrapolate on the and on that data.
Okay, sir.
And you can have in your subset of data, you can maybe classify them into males and females, whatever. So you will have a in-depth idea as to whether there is any bias between these two in terms
Okay,
of
sir.
their knowledge on, let us say, COVID-19, its spread, as well as their digital awareness also can be analyzed. So
Okay,
let us
sir.
say school students, college students, or employees, or so the younger population might be digitally more savvy and more digitally inclined
Okay.
compared to a let us say an age population, right? Around 40s, in their 40s or 50s. So then you will have a clear idea how the digital technologies are useful in spreading awareness on the
COVID-19.
current pandemic. Yeah,
Mm.
current pandemic. Yeah.
Okay,
So
sir.
I would suggest that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, sir.
Mm.
Thank you, sir. Next is a very tricky question, I should say, from Ria Mol. Different researchers work at different pace. So,
Okay.
do we have a relaxation on the deadline to complete a particular research work?
No, that is not a tricky question. It is a very relevant question, and I should congratulate Miss Priya Mol for asking that particular question. So, unfortunately, in India, uh, we have a time frame. So, ideally, I would say research should not be having any time point. So, ideally, what she said is it is an inventive or innovative program. So, you would never know how when you are going to come to a conclusion, but this cannot go let us say unendedly. So that is why we have a time frame. So currently universities as well as institutions are very strict on the time frames. So 3 years or 5 years uh, depending on full time or part time research. So what she said is right. During this procedures we cannot adhere to that particularly. If you want to do good research, you might not be able to complete it within that particular time frame. So that is where your research planning comes into important research planning comes into force. So if you have a good research plan, if you have a good let us say research design, you would be able to, I would say you would be able to do a significant amount of novel research within that particular time frame. So one has to focus on the time frame, one has to focus on the innovative steps. So there has to be a balance, there has to be a give and take. So you should have some innovative things within your research plan. At the same time, you should also make sure that you are able to achieve it within that time frame. So that goes in good research planning. So if you plan it well, I think it is achievable. It is doable. It is not something that you cannot do, but you have to remember that those goals should be achievable. It should not be like you might require another 10 to 15 years to come to the conclusion. So that kind of research problems you better not take up when you are a PhD student. Maybe when you become an independent scientist or a researcher, one can always focus on such long-term goals. So that will be my take on this question.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And there is one more question from Ria. Like finding a proper mentor is a challenge. Their research works might speak, but their choice might go wrong. What are the things we should be careful of while choosing a mentor?
Okay. Okay. Mentors. Okay. Let us. Okay. Let let me put it this way. So if you want to, so mostly students will have an idea as to which area they would like to work on, right? So one should be able to find a good mentor in that particular research area. So how do you find a good mentor in that particular research area? Let us say he or she, if you go through their publications, I already mentioned, you will come to know about the scientific, let us say, caliber. Then normally what happens is that you can talk to your peers. So let us say you go for an interview in ICER, RGCV, or any other research institution. You always talk with your peers, like the students who are already there in the lab. You can always talk to them regarding the mentor, how that mentor is, whether he is very strict, whether he or she is very um, taxing. All those things you can always talk to them. So this is how you can select a mentor. So let us say if that person, he or she is really strict, at the same time he wants good for you, I think you should go for that mentor, that kind of a mentor. So one has to see your aim is to get well trained. So training is what is happening in a PhD program. So the kind of training that you receive depends on two things: the research environment that is existing in that particular institution, as well as the mentor. So the mentor alone, if he or she is present in a uh, resource poor setting, he or she may not be significantly able to contribute to your research awareness. Whereas a bad mentor in a good resourceful setting is also equally bad. So one has to be careful while choosing the mentor. So I would suggest a mentor who is significantly having expertise in that particular area and who is significantly resourceful is the ideal person that you can select. And this you can whether that person, that lab is fully good, very well funded in terms of funding also has to be ensured from peers. So if you are talking to a lab mate, you are talking to a senior in the lab, you will get an idea whether the lab is funded well, whether the mentor is good, whether whether the students who have already done their PhD from that lab, whether they are well placed, where they are now. So all these things give an idea about the mentor. And then for any let us say for any interview, PhD interview, you will have a one-to-one conversation with your mentor. That also will serve you well. Then finally you can decide. I think I answered that question to your
Yeah.
satisfaction, hopefully.
Another question is, can a qualitative research be done for postgraduate thesis or PhD thesis? Is that beneficial?
Qualitative research.
Yes.
Can you define that?
Aparna Meenakshi, are you there?
Hello? Aparna?
Aparna, are you there?
Madam, can you repeat the question?
Can a qualitative research be done for postgraduate or PhD thesis? Is it beneficial?
Qualitative research. Aparna, I mean, she is from which background, may I know?
She is from home science.
Okay, so maybe when she talks, so can you elaborate on that? Qualitative research, what does she drive to? Is it the quality of the food, or did she mean that, or I'm not very clear about the question. So
See, I'm not sure what she's looking into, but I personally feel like she may be looking into collecting and analyzing documentation of text, video, audio, such things, going
okay,
in depth into the problems or generate new ideas for research, analyzing non-numerical data.
okay, okay, qualitative. Okay, that is possible. That is possible for PG as well as research work. That is possible. But if it is significantly relevant, so then only it gives you a good leverage, right? If it doesn't significantly add on to the existing knowledge, then it is not useful. So if that kind of relevance is there in that particular qualitative research that she is planning, then well and good, no issues in that. So it always need not be quantitative.
Yeah. Another question is, if we are doing an intervention for promoting an existing or new program, is there any prerequisites? Another
Intervention,
question is incomplete.
intervention
Julie,
for
intervention for promoting an existing program or a new program, is there any
so
prerequisites?
intervention in the sense, what does she mean by intervention?
Julie, are you there? Julie? Julie Martin?
Yes, ma'am. Yes. Hello,
Julie.
sir. I was planning to do an intervention program on promoting the elderly self-help groups in Kerala.
Okay.
So I was just thinking that whether we'll be having any status about the analyzing of the intervention effects in the among the older people. So
So when you talk about intervention during this pandemic, are you talking about the current situation?
yes, sir.
So can you repeat the question?
Is there any prerequisites for conducting an intervention program on promoting the elderly self-help groups?
No, no prerequisites are there. No prerequisites are there. You need not have any prerequisites for that. Okay. So when you are planning an intervention, you have to ensure that whatever intention, I mean, let us say intervention that you are planning, it should be beneficial.
Okay. Okay.
It should not be, let us say, harmful to that particular group. That is the only thing you need to ensure. This you can because this pandemic is not something that has occurred out of the blue. Similar pandemics and outbreaks have been there in other countries. Let us say the Ebola outbreak. So there are a lot of examples, or the outbreak of the Marburg virus in Germany. So you can take all those studies. So previous existing literature is there on the impact of such pandemics in elderly. Okay. You can always go back to the literature and find out what are the intervention strategies that were implemented, if any, there. And similar work can be planned in our in the present situation for our elderly population.
Yes, sir. Thank you,
So
sir.
when you mean intervention, can you elaborate on that? What do you mean by exactly by intervention? Let us say, can you give an example?
It's like to create a economical stability. We are like what can be done there to the among the elderly people, like any elderly self-help groups. We'll teach them any technical skills so that they can survive.
Okay. I got it. Okay. So such that is tricky because I don't know whether any published information is available, especially in the current pandemic situation. I need to do some digging because I have not done that kind of literature search. Okay. I got it. Okay. So maybe in a larger population, you can look
Thank
at
you, sir.
SARS outbreak. Okay. I think that will be something that you can look into,
Yes, sir.
especially in Korea or Southeast Asian countries. If you are able to get some literature on that, I think that will be relevant. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
To add on to Julie Martin, Julie, you can refer to some of the published articles related to the impact of elderly self-help groups in US and Canada. There are a lot of, and even in Tamil Nadu also, the government of Tamil Nadu is doing lots of initiatives on bringing the concept of elderly self-help groups, and it's been 2.5 years, and so definitely you will have time to have an impact study also. So few research articles are available on that also, so you can have a look on that out as well, so getting a better idea. Okay, I think Manishankar, that's all for now. Is there any other questions from the participant side?
I think the direct interaction might be more effective.
Yes. That's
Maybe
right.
from next time, I think the participants can directly interact with the men.
Due to the network issues, and so many are hesitant to come
Mm.
online to have a discussion. That's the main issue.
Mm.
And
I think
Manisha,
this particular group is elite group, so they need to
yes,
be more open.
yes,
They
yes,
need to be
true.
interactive. Especially, they need to be more communicative, right?
Yes,
Because
yes,
you want them to do good research. So I think from the next class onwards, the like
exactly.
mentees or the students directly interact with the presenter.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Manisha, we have Dr. Raju Krishnan sir with us.
Yeah.
Maybe sir can also reflect on something about this particular topic. Manishanga, could you please stop your
Yeah,
screen from
I will stop it. Yeah, 1 second.
so that we can see you as well?
Sure.
Raju Krishnan sir, are you there?
Yeah. I think you can see me.
Yes.
Okay.
Sir, are you there? Would you like to talk?
I'm here. I'm here. Nandule.
Sir,
Good evening,
we
sir.
will.
Good evening, sir.
So I must congratulate Dr. Manishankar on the very good presentation, and I'm happy
Thank
that several students have joined the L3. I think it's organized by the L3 group, I suppose. Is it not?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes.
So I'm happy that teachers like you, who are the proud members of the FAIR group, supporting the younger generation and attracting them to new areas of research by your and guidance at this stage. So I don't have much to say on this occasion, because I think I have last year, a year or two back, I have met some of the students of L3 at the Department of Home Science and discussed with them the various areas of research possible. I'm doing my bit also for the support of the students through my columns in the dailies. Even today, I have a article of internship for the World Bank. I suppose some of the students might have seen it. So you must all grab all these opportunities, because this is a platform to build up your career, your research interest, and also grab the opportunities across the world, not restricted to Kerala or India, because so many avenues, opportunities are there for the younger generation. So I hope the L3 group will do their bit with the leadership of Dr. Sitara and people like Dr. Shankar and others in the group. So I wish the students all the very best, and I congratulate Dr. Sitara for making this taking up this challenge, and Dr. Manishankar for giving a beautiful presentation. Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. For the information of the students, Dr. Raju Krishnan sir is our mentor actually. So, like how I am taking a class for you, he is our motivator. So we got motivated from him and Dr. Jay Kiran. So they are our mentors, and now we are trying to cater to the next generation. And I'm indeed honored that sir, you came and you were there for the presentation. And thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Now I invite Adira Krishnan to propose the vote of thanks. Adira.
Good evening, all. The session was extremely useful. Thank you, Manishanga Babu sir. Thank you, Sitara ma'am, for organizing such a wonderful session. And special gratitude for Raju Krishan sir. Thank you, all the participants. Thank you so much.
I should thank Dr. Sitara and Raju Krishnan sir, and I find Biju sir is here. So thank you, Biju sir. And thank you, Sitara teacher, for giving me this opportunity to interact with the students. and I'll be happy to share my thoughts on research on any other areas for the students if they are interested. So I'll be happy to support them in any way possible. Thank you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Manishankar Babu. We have our colleagues, Dr. Biju PG from the Department of Biochemistry, University of Kerala. We had Dr. Shruti Ramachandran here. So it's a teamwork, I should say. And as Dr. Manishankar was mentioning, we all are really grateful to our mentors, Dr. Rajakrishnan sir and Dr. Jekaran sir. Because of them, today we were able to provide such a platform to our next generation students. So see you with another topic on research. Till then, thank you all. Thank you, Dr. Manishankar. Thank you so much. Thank you, Biju sir. Thank you, Rajakrishnan sir. Thank you, everyone. And special thanks to all the research scholars who joined with us. Thank you all. Good evening. Have a nice time. Thank you.